Rain traced silver threads down the cafe window, each drop racing the other toward the edge where the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and gray. Arjun sat by the glass, the last customer in a quiet corner, a cup of coffee gone cold before him. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and melancholy. It had been 2 years since she left, but every drop of rain still whispered her name. The same cafe. The same seat. The same rain. Only he was different, or perhaps, emptier. He adjusted his glasses and stared at the untouched cup. Back then, he could barely afford even one. They used to share it, laughing as they argued over whose turn it was to pay. Priya always teased him, "You'll be a big man one day, Arjun. I'll still make you split the bill." She'd say it with a grin that could outshine any dream. He smiled faintly at the memory, though it hurt to do so. Back then, life had been simple, a small rented apartment, late-night coding sessions, and shared street food dinners. They were both broke, yet they had something that felt infinite. Hope. Then came the cracks. Her father's disapproval grew louder with each visit. Her friends began to marry bankers, doctors, men whose success was visible in suits and cars. Arjun had nothing visible yet, only ambition, and faith in what he was building. But faith can't fill an empty fridge, and ambition doesn't pay hospital bills. The night she left him had been just like this, raining, the city crying alongside him. He remembered the sound of her footsteps as she came into the cafe, soaked through from the storm. Her face had been pale, her eyes red. "Arjun," she'd said softly, "we need to talk." He'd known immediately. Those 4 words never end well. She sat down across from him, her hands trembling as she removed her wet scarf. "My father has found someone for me," she said. "He's stable, respected, he can give me everything I've ever wanted." He didn't respond. He just watched the raindrops collide against the window. After a long silence, he asked, "And what about love?" Her eyes had glistened. "Love can't survive without stability, Arjun. You'll understand one day. I'm tired of fighting everyone. I'm tired of waiting for, someday." He wanted to tell her that someday was close, that his idea was finally gaining traction, that investors were showing interest, that he could almost see the light. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw the exhaustion of years, the silent war between her heart and her family. So instead, he said nothing. The rain grew heavier, blurring everything outside. Her tears fell quietly, matching the rhythm of the storm. Then she whispered, "I love you, Arjun, but I can't do this anymore." And with that, she was gone. Now, 2 years later, success had found him, or so the world said. His company had become one of the fastest-growing startups in the country. Journalists called him a visionary. His name appeared on magazine covers. He lived in a high-rise apartment overlooking the same city where he once struggled to pay rent. But what the articles didn't mention was the emptiness that came after applause faded. He had everything he once dreamed of: wealth, recognition, influence. Yet, every time it rained, he found himself back in that cafe, staring out the same window, waiting for a shadow that never came. The waiter recognized him now. "Another cappuccino, sir." Arjun nodded absent-mindedly. The man smiled politely, the kind of smile reserved for celebrities. But Arjun noticed something odd. Fame had changed how people looked at him, but not how he felt about himself. To them, he was successful. To himself, he was still the man in the rain, reaching for something that had already slipped away. He took out his phone and scrolled through old photos. There she was, Priya, laughing, her eyes bright, a smudge of chocolate on her nose from the dessert she'd insisted on sharing. He could almost hear her voice. "One day, when you're rich, promise me you won't forget me." "I could never," he had said then, and it had been true. Now he whispered it again, quietly to the rain. "I never did." The doorbell chimed as another customer entered. For a second, his heart skipped. But it wasn't her, just a young couple, hand in hand, whispering and smiling over a shared pastry. Their laughter filled the quiet space, and Arjun watched them with a strange ache. That used to be him and Priya, 2 dreamers against the world. He wondered how she was now. Married, probably. Comfortable, maybe even happy. He hoped she was. She deserved peace. But part of him wished she could see him now, to know he made it, that all the sacrifices, the nights of hunger and doubt, had meant something. Maybe then she would understand that love had not been weakness. It had been his strength all along. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the rain. It was strange, how success, for all its glory, could feel so quiet. The world celebrated him, but he couldn't celebrate himself. Because when he looked at everything he had built, he couldn't help wondering what it would have meant if she were there beside him. He'd once thought love was a distraction, something that slowed progress. But now he knew, it had been the only thing that made the struggle bearable. Without it, even victory tasted bitter. A message pinged on his phone, a congratulatory text from a business partner about another milestone. Arjun stared at it for a moment, then put the phone face down. Outside, the rain began to ease, the clouds parting just enough for a faint glow of moonlight to spill across the wet streets. He sipped his coffee finally, cold, but still strong. The taste was sharp, real, grounding. Somewhere deep inside, he made peace with the past. Maybe life had chosen differently for both of them, but love wasn't something that disappeared, it simply changed form. It had pushed him forward when he wanted to give up. It had been his reason, his fire. He looked once more at the window, at the reflection of the man he had become. Not the poor dreamer, not the heartbroken lover, not the celebrated entrepreneur, but someone who understood that love, wealth, and success weren't enemies. They were choices that shaped each other. And in that realization, the ache in his chest softened. The rain stopped. Arjun stood, left a generous tip on the table, and walked out into the cool night. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement like scattered stars, and for the first time in a long while, he smiled, not for cameras, not for fame, but for himself. He whispered to the wind, "We made it, Priya. Both of us." And as he walked away, the empty cafe behind him felt less like a memory and more like a chapter finally closing. Softly, peacefully, under the quiet glow of success and the lingering echo of love. The chandeliers shimmered above the ballroom like captured stars, their golden light reflecting off crystal glasses and sequined gowns. Soft music filled the air, a blend of violin and polite laughter, the kind that belonged to people who had long since learned how to hide sadness behind sophistication. Arjun walked through the crowd, his tailored black suit fitting perfectly, his name whispered from table to table. Every handshake carried admiration, every greeting began with, "You're an inspiration." He had been to countless events like this, award nights, investment galas, fundraisers, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the fatigue in his smile, or maybe it was the way the air hummed. With something familiar yet forgotten. The charity gala was meant to celebrate success stories, people who had risen from nothing. And Arjun was the evening's star. On stage, his story would be told. The boy who once couldn't afford a bus ticket, now worth millions. A tale of perseverance, ambition, and triumph. But inside, Arjun didn't feel triumphant. He felt hollow. He accepted a glass of sparkling water from a waiter and stood near the corner, half listening to speeches he'd heard 100 times. His mind drifted, as it often did, to the one person missing from every success story told about him, Priya. Then, as if the universe decided to answer the ache he'd tried to bury, he saw her. At first, it was just a flicker of recognition, the curve of her shoulder, the way she turned her head when she laughed politely. But when she glanced across the room, their eyes met, and the noise around him disappeared. The years folded like paper, and he was back in that rain-soaked cafe, watching her walk away. Priya. She looked stunning, yet there was a fragility in her beauty now, the kind that came from holding yourself together for too long. Her hair was pinned neatly, her smile practiced, her posture perfect. But her eyes, those deep brown eyes that once burned with dreams, seemed tired. Beside her stood a man Arjun recognized from the business pages, Rajiv Malhotra, her husband. Successful, powerful, everything her father had wanted for her. He was speaking animatedly with a group of investors, unaware of the silent storm that had just ignited across the hall. Arjun didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just watched her. And then, as if drawn by an invisible force, she looked back. For a heartbeat, neither of them pretended. All the walls, time, distance, choices, crumbled. Priya excused herself from the group and walked slowly toward him. Each step felt like it carried the weight of years. Arjun's heartbeat quickened, not out of nervousness, but out of recognition, that strange comfort of seeing the one person who still knew the real you beneath the armor of success. "Arjun," she said softly when she reached him. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed steady. He smiled faintly. "Priya, it's been a long time." 3 years, she replied, as if she had been counting too. They both laughed lightly, not out of humor, but to soften the ache between them. I've followed your journey, she said. Every headline, every interview. You did it, Arjun. You became everything you dreamed. He nodded, his expression unreadable. And you got everything you were promised. Her gaze faltered. Yes, I did. A silence settled between them, heavy and fragile. Around them, people laughed, glasses clinked, cameras flashed, but their world had shrunk to the small space where two souls met again. He wanted to ask if she was happy, but he didn't. Some questions don't need answers, the truth already shows in the eyes. Instead, he said, I thought I'd feel different when I made it. I thought success would fill the emptiness. But it didn't. She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I thought wealth would bring peace. That maybe I could buy comfort for the heart I left behind. But it didn't. He studied her face, older now, more graceful, but still carrying the same spark that had once made him believe in impossible dreams. You still love him? He asked gently, nodding toward her husband across the hall. She hesitated. He's kind. He takes care of me. But love, she paused, then whispered, love doesn't grow where it's planted out of duty. Arjun's chest tightened. He wanted to reach for her hand, to say that maybe it wasn't too late, that life sometimes gives second chances when you least expect them. But he didn't, because he knew she had made her choices, just as he had. Instead, he smiled sadly. We both got what we wanted, but not what we needed. Her eyes glistened. You always understood things I could never say. Someone called her name from across the room. Her husband had noticed her absence. The moment began to dissolve. She turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back at him. Arjun, she said softly, you taught me something. Love isn't the opposite of success, it's the reason to achieve it. He said nothing, just smiled, that quiet, aching smile of someone who finally accepts what can never be changed. As she walked back to her husband, he felt no anger, no jealousy, only gratitude. Because for the first time, he understood what love truly meant. It wasn't possession or proximity. It was wishing someone well, even from afar. Later that night, when his name was called on stage and the applause thundered around him, he stood under the golden lights and looked out at the crowd. From where he stood, he could see Priya sitting at one of the tables, her face half lit by the glow of the chandeliers. Their eyes met one last time. She smiled, not the forced one she'd worn earlier, but a real one. Gentle, proud. Arjun spoke to the audience, but every word was meant for her. People often ask me what success means, he began. For years, I thought it was about wealth or recognition. But I've learned that true success is being at peace with your heart, to remember love without pain, to be grateful for what shaped you, even if it broke you first. The hall fell silent. His voice didn't tremble, but his eyes shone. He ended his speech with, everything I've built, everything I've achieved, was inspired by someone who once believed in me when I had nothing. I owe my success to love. After the gala, when the lights dimmed and the guests began to leave, Arjun signed a check donating half his fortune to a children's foundation, a decision he'd made quietly, from the heart. Not out of guilt, but out of understanding. Outside, the night air was cool, the city alive with lights. He stood for a while beneath the stars, feeling lighter than he had in years. Wealth builds walls, he thought. Success builds names. But love builds souls. And though Priya had gone her way and he had gone his, somewhere in the quiet space between their lives, their souls still touched, gently, eternally, like two stars that once burned together and still shared the same sky.